70% of cardiac arrests happen at home, but for a man like Aris Thorne, it happened at 7:43 p.m. on the 34th floor of his own glass tower, utterly alone. The only other soul in the building was a 3-year-old girl who shouldn't have been there at all. Aris Thorne was a name that meant power, a billionaire who built an empire on ruthless efficiency. The little girl was Maya, whose mother Chloe cleaned his offices after dark. Their worlds were never meant to touch. So how did a child, who still believed in cartoon band-aids, become the only thing standing between a titan of industry and death? The answer starts hours earlier, in the relentless rhythm of two lives running on parallel tracks, destined for a collision that would defy every rule. Chloe's day began in the dark at 4:38 a.m. Not 4:30, not 4:45, 4:38. That was the exact margin she had calculated for survival. 16 minutes to shower and dress in silence. 12 minutes to make breakfast and pack the diaper bag. 23 minutes for the bus and 2 train transfers to reach the downtown core by 6:20 if the system was running smoothly, which it never was. She lived inside that fragile schedule, a clockwork life where a 3-minute delay could unravel everything. The apartment was a 500-square-foot box that smelled of damp carpet and the neighbor's perpetual fried fish. She slept on the fold-out couch so Maya could have the bedroom. The couch had a bar that pressed into her spine, a pain she had accepted months ago as a permanent part of her anatomy. Single mother, 29 years old, primary income, cleaning commercial offices for a service contracted by the city's top firms. Her largest, most crucial account was Thorne Industries. It paid her rent, it paid for Maya's daycare, or it was supposed to. But the call came at 5:15 a.m. as Chloe was tying her shoes. The daycare center was closed due to a burst pipe. No backup, no warning, the third disruption in a month. She stood in her tiny kitchen, phone against her ear, staring at the peeling linoleum. She had used her last personal day 2 weeks prior when Maya had a fever. If she didn't show up for the Thorne account, the service would give the premium route to someone else. She knew the rule. She had signed the contract. Reliability was the only currency she had. So she did what generations of mothers with no safety net have done. She improvised. She would bring Maya with her. She had done it once before at a smaller law firm, hiding her daughter in a supply closet with a tablet and snacks. It was against every company policy, a fireable offense. But being fired was a tomorrow problem. Losing the route today was an eviction notice. She woke Maya, dressed her in her bright pink dress, packed double the snacks, and prayed for the kind of invisibility that only the powerless can achieve. Across the city, in a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of a building he owned, Aris Thorne was already awake. His day began at 5 a.m. sharp, not with an alarm, but with a visceral, unwelcome clarity. He had slept for perhaps 3 hours. His doctor's words from the previous week played on a loop in the silence. Your stress markers are off the charts, Aris. Your ECG shows concerning irregularities. If you do not change your pace, you are a prime candidate for a significant cardiac event. This isn't a suggestion. It is a clinical prediction. Thorne had dismissed him. He was 48. He had built a $12 billion data analytics firm from a dorm room idea. He had outmaneuvered rivals, survived market crashes, and thrived on pressure. His body was an instrument of his will, or so he believed. He swallowed the prescribed beta blockers with a sip of imported water and ignored the faint, familiar ache that had taken residence behind his sternum. It was just acid reflux. It was always just acid reflux. He arrived at the Thorne Industries Tower by 6 a.m., bypassing the empty lobby with a private elevator that opened directly into his suite. His office was a monument to cold perfection, glass, steel, and a breathtaking view of the waking city that he no longer saw. On his desk were 2 piles. The left pile, quarterly reports showing growth that would thrill his board. The right pile, confidential letters from his legal team outlining 3 separate shareholder lawsuits, all alleging unethical competitive practices. The right pile was taller. He had not spoken to his sister in over a year. His last real friend had resigned from the board 6 months ago, citing philosophical differences, which was corporate code for finding Aris unbearable. His marriage had dissolved a decade prior, a quiet, expensive transaction that felt more like a merger unraveling than a heart-breaking. His life had narrowed to a single point, the preservation and expansion of the empire that bore his name. And that empire, he sensed with a predator's instinct, was on the verge of turning on him. The first rule of the night cleaning crew was invisibility. You were a ghost. You left no trace of your presence except for the cleanliness you created. You did not move a single paper on a desk. You did not log into a computer screen left open. You did not make a personal call. And you absolutely, under no circumstances, brought an unauthorized person, especially a child, onto the premises. Chloe had the rules memorized. They were laminated on a card in her cleaning caddy. She entered the tower at 7 p.m. through the service entrance in the alley, her keycard buzzing her through the security door. Maya was strapped to her hip, wide-eyed at the cavernous, dark lobby. "SHH, baby, quiet as mice," Chloe whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. She signed in with the night security guard, Frank, a man in his 60s who glanced at Maya, then at Chloe's pleading eyes, and simply nodded once, looking back at his monitor. A small, priceless act of mercy. Her route was the executive floors, 33 and 34. Thorne's personal suite was on 34. It was always the last to be cleaned, because he was often still there. The protocol was to wait until he left. She would start on 33, vacuuming empty halls, wiping down glass conference rooms that held the echoes of million-dollar decisions, cleaning bathrooms where people washed their hands of the day's compromises. Tonight, as she emptied trash bins, she found the evidence of Thorne's presence. On 33, in a vice president's office, a discarded stress ball ripped clean in half. In another, a shattered tablet screen left neatly on the desk as if awaiting disposal. The air felt charged, like after a lightning strike. Up on 34, the light was on under the door to the corner office. He was still here. She could feel the pressure of his presence like a physical weight. She retreated to a utility closet on 33, the one with a small sink and a locked cabinet for supplies. She made a nest for Maya with her coat, gave her the tablet with headphones and a bag of cereal. "Mama has to work just down the hall. You stay here, don't touch anything, don't open the door. I'll be back to check every 15 minutes. Okay." Maya, clutching her worn stuffed dolphin named Bubbles, nodded solemnly. "I be a mouse." Meanwhile, in his office, Aris Thorne was losing a battle he refused to name. The ache in his chest had sharpened into a definite pain, a tight band squeezing his ribs with each breath. He dismissed it as muscle strain from sitting too long. He had just fired his head of security over a leaked document, a conversation that ended with the man shouting that Thorne was a toxic monument to his own ego. The board chairman had left a voicemail demanding a call first thing in the morning. The right-hand pile of legal threats seemed to pulse on his desk. He made a decision, the kind that defines a tragedy. He would not go home to his empty penthouse. He would stay and conquer the pile. He would power through the discomfort as he had powered through every obstacle. He ordered dinner from the late-night delivery service his assistant had arranged, a salad he wouldn't eat, and told the night security desk he was working late and was not to be disturbed for any reason. He dimmed the lights, leaving only the stark pool of his desk lamp, an island in a sea of shadows. Down on 33, Chloe worked with frantic efficiency, her ears straining for any sound from the closet. Every few minutes, she would crack the door. Maya was there, engrossed in a cartoon, Bubbles tucked under her arm. So far, so good. She just had to finish this floor, wait for Thorne to leave, then do his suite and get out. The plan was holding. But at 8:47, the plan shattered. Chloe was vacuuming a hallway when the industrial machine let out a deafening pop and a burning smell, then died. The circuit breaker for that wing had tripped. The hallway and the utility closet were plunged into absolute darkness. From the closet, she heard a small, frightened whimper, then a call, "Mama." The sound was like a shot. Chloe dropped the vacuum hose and ran. She reached the closet to find Maya standing in the doorway, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Dark, Mama, scary. It took Chloe 20 minutes to find the right breaker panel, reset it, and restore the lights. 20 minutes in which Maya's fear turned into restless curiosity. The incident had broken the spell of the tablet. The closet was now a prison. "I come with you," Maya stated, a 3-year-old edict. Desperate, Chloe made a new, worse calculation. Thorne's office light was still on. He could be there for hours. She would take Maya with her to clean the smaller, empty offices on the far side of 34, away from his door. She would keep her close, keep her quiet. It was an insane risk. It was her only option. She took Maya's hand. Okay, but you hold Bubbles and Mama's leg. You are my silent shadow, not a word, not a peep. They took the service elevator up to 34. The floor was a tomb, lit only by emergency exit signs and the slant of light from beneath one door at the end of the hall, Aris Thorne's office. Chloe's blood turned to ice water. He was still here. She set up Maya in a small, windowless conference room directly across from a lit exit sign, giving her a coloring book and crayons. Right here. Mama will be in that room right there. You can see the light under my door. I will leave the door open a crack. You do not move. She began cleaning an empty office, her body a live wire of tension, her eyes glued to the crack in the door, watching for the small shadow of her daughter. She could hear the faint, rhythmic scratch of crayon on paper. In his office, Aris Thorne felt the band around his chest tighten viciously. A wave of nausea swept over him. A cold, clammy sweat beaded on his forehead. The numbers on the financial report in front of him blurred and swam. For the first time, a primal alarm bell clanged in the back of his brain. This was not reflux. This was not stress. This was something his will could not command away. He pushed himself up from his desk, his vision tunneling. He needed air, he needed help. He took 2 stumbling steps toward the door, his hand outstretched for the handle. And then the pain exploded, a white-hot crushing force that centralized in his chest and radiated down his left arm. It stole his breath, it stole his balance, it stole every thought except one: this is it. He did not reach the door. He collapsed, first against his glass desk, sending a monitor crashing to the floor, then onto the imported rug, a soft, soundless fall. The world shrank to the fibers of the carpet against his cheek, the distant, receding ceiling lights, and the terrifying, silent scream of a heart in revolt. The crash of the monitor was a thunderclap in the silent hallway. In the conference room, Maya's head snapped up. She put down her green crayon. She looked at the light under her mother's door, then down the hall toward the source of the sound. The big man's room, the room Mama said was off-limits. Chloe froze in the office she was cleaning, a dust rag clenched in her fist. The sound was unmistakable. Something had broken, something heavy. She held her breath, listening for a curse, for footsteps, for any sign of movement from Thorne's office. There was nothing, only a silence deeper than before. After a full minute, she crept to her doorway. The hall was empty, the light under Thorne's door still glowed, but something was wrong. The air had changed. She took a step out, intending to quickly check on Maya first. But Maya was already gone. The conference room was empty. The coloring book lay open, the green crayon rolled to the edge of the table. Chloe's heart stopped. Her eyes shot down the hall, and there she saw it. The door to Aris Thorne's office, which had been firmly shut, was now open, just a crack, just enough for a small, 3-year-old shadow to have slipped inside. Inside the office, the world was still. Maya stood just past the doorway, Bubbles dangling from her hand, her eyes wide. The big desk was messy. A black screen lay on the floor next to shiny pieces, and on the floor, between the desk and a big black chair, was the man. He wasn't moving. He was on his side, one arm tucked under him, his face pale and shiny with sweat. Maya didn't know what a heart attack was. She didn't know the words cardiac arrest or myocardial infarction. What she knew was this: grown-ups didn't lie on the floor unless something was very wrong. She had seen her mama lie down on the couch sometimes after work, with a hand over her eyes, saying she just needed a minute. But this was different. This silence had a shape to it. It was heavy. She took 2 small steps forward, her pink sneakers silent on the thick rug. "Mister," she whispered. No answer, not even a twitch. Out in the hallway, Chloe's paralysis broke. A surge of pure adrenaline, colder than ice, shot through her veins. Maya, Thorne's office. The crash. The sequence of facts connected into a single, terrifying conclusion. She ran, not caring about noise now, her cleaning sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. She reached the open door and her body locked in the frame. The scene imprinted itself instantly, a snapshot of disaster. The billionaire on the floor, her daughter 3 feet away, staring. Time didn't slow down, it fractured. Every possible future branched out from this moment, and every one of them was catastrophic. If he was dead, if Maya had seen, if she was blamed, her mind screamed in a dozen directions at once. "Maya," she hissed, the sound strangled. Come here now." But Maya didn't come. She pointed a small finger. "Mama, the man is sleeping on the floor." Chloe's training, a distant memory from a long-ago babysitting certification, surfaced through the panic. Check for danger, check for response. The danger was the situation itself. The response was absent. She forced herself across the threshold, her eyes darting from Thorne's prone form to his desk to the phone. She knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close, but her professional gaze was on the man. His chest. Was it moving? She couldn't tell. His lips had a bluish tint. "Aris," she said, then louder, "Mr. Thorne." "Nothing." This was beyond her. This was a call for help. Call 911, all hands on deck emergency. But the calculus of her own survival intervened with brutal clarity. If she called 911 from here, her presence with her child would be recorded. The security logs would show she signed in with Maya. The service would fire her instantly for breach of contract. They might even press trespassing charges. She could lose custody. The chain of consequences was a freefall. But a man was dying in front of her. Maya squirmed in her grip. "He's got a boo-boo," she announced, her voice carrying the simple, diagnostic certainty of a child. Chloe looked at her daughter, then at the man. The social contract, the fear of institutions, the weight of her own precarious life, it all crumpled against the raw human truth on the rug. She made a choice. She let go of Maya and scrambled on her knees to Thorne's side. She pressed 2 fingers against the side of his neck, where she thought a pulse should be. She felt nothing but cool, clammy skin. Or was that her own trembling? She wasn't sure. She leaned her cheek close to his mouth, listening, watching for the fog of breath. A faint, ragged whisper of air touched her skin. He was alive, but barely. "Okay, okay, okay," she chanted to herself, a mantra of focus. She needed a phone. Her own was in her cleaning caddy down the hall. Thorne's desk phone was a sleek multi-line console. She lunged for it, grabbed the handset and heard nothing. Dead air. She jabbed the button for an outside line. Silence. In his paranoia or his need for control, he must have had the lines locked after hours, routing all calls through a secure system she couldn't access. Panic tightened its grip. Her phone was too far. The elevators needed a keycard after 8 p.m. The night security desk was 34 floors down. Frank might not even be at the desk. He did his rounds. Every second was a grain of sand falling. "Mama, use the shiny phone," Maya said. Chloe followed her daughter's pointing finger. On the floor, near Thorne's outstretched hand, was his personal cell phone. It must have fallen from his pocket or his desk during the collapse. It was face down on the carpet. She snatched it up. The screen was locked. A digital keypad and a thumbprint sensor glowed faintly. "No, no, no," she groaned, trying to swipe, pressing the power button. It demanded a passcode or a fingerprint. Thorne's hand lay limp, his fingers curled. She grabbed his wrist, manhandling his hand to try and press his thumb to the sensor. It was inert, uncooperative. The phone didn't recognize it. They were locked in with him, trapped in a soundproof, high-floor office with a dying man and a useless piece of locked technology. This was the moment. This was the precipice where the story could have ended in tragedy. A cleaner and her child, discovered hours later next to the body of a billionaire, their presence inexplicable, their actions suspect. A headline waiting to happen. But then Maya reached out, not for her mother, not in fear. She reached for the phone in Chloe's hand. "My game," she said simply. In a daze, Chloe handed it to her. What did it matter now? Maya took the sleek black device with both hands, her small fingers familiar with the shape of a smartphone. She had played educational games on Chloe's old phone for years. She looked at the locked screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. She saw the little emergency button in the corner, a feature Chloe had once shown her on their own phone during a safety talk. "If you ever need help and Mama can't talk, you push this, and then the green button." Maya's thumb, sticky from fruit snacks, pressed the emergency text. The screen changed, bypassing the lock. A simple keypad appeared with a large button to call emergency services. She looked up at Chloe, seeking confirmation. "The green button, Mama." Chloe's breath caught. She nodded, unable to speak. Maya pressed it. The line connected almost instantly. A calm, professional female voice filled the quiet room from the phone's speaker. 911, what is your emergency?" Maya blinked, holding the phone to her ear the way she'd seen her mother do 1,000 times. She was silent for a beat, then her voice, clear and high, filled the office. "Hello, the man is on the floor. He has a boo-boo." In the background, Chloe heard the dispatcher's voice, asking for an address. Maya just repeated, "He's on the floor." She didn't know the address. She didn't know what the building was called. The dispatcher, trained for this, asked another question. "Can you give the phone to a grown-up, honey?" Maya turned and held the phone out to Chloe. The gesture was an anchor. Chloe took it, her hand steadying. She put it to her ear. "This is the Thorn Industries Tower," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "34th floor, the corner executive suite. A man is unconscious, not breathing well. I think it's his heart. He's cold and blue. Please hurry." The dispatcher kept her on the line, asking questions to assess Thorn's condition, instructing her on how to check for a pulse again, how to place him in the recovery position if it was safe to move him. Chloe relayed information, her fingers back on Thorn's neck. This time, she thought she felt a faint, thready flutter. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was real. While Chloe was tethered to the dispatcher's voice, Maya crouched down. She set Bubbles aside carefully and looked at Aris Thorn's face. He didn't look scary anymore. He just looked sad and alone, like the time she'd fallen off the slide and had the wind knocked out of her. She reached out and patted his hand. "It's okay," she whispered, "a secret just for him. The helper lady is coming." Down in the security office, Frank saw the alert flash on his monitor. A 911 call had been placed from a registered device belonging to A. Thorn. The system automatically tagged the location, the executive suite. His blood ran cold. He grabbed his radio and his master keycard, calling out as he ran for the elevator bank. "Base to any unit, medical emergency on floor 34. Notify EMS en route. I'm heading up." The sirens began in the distance, a faint wail that grew into a piercing scream as it converged on the financial district. On the 34th floor, the world was still divided into a microcosm of 3 people. Chloe, following CPR instructions now, her hands positioned over a stranger's chest, ready to pump the heart of a man who could destroy her life with a single lawsuit. Maya, sitting cross-legged nearby, watching her mother be brave. And Aris Thorn, hovering somewhere in the grey space between life and death, unaware that his fate now rested in the hands of the invisible people he passed every day without seeing. Chloe began compressions. The dispatcher counted with her. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Each compression was a rebellion. Each push against his sternum was an act of defiance against every rule she had broken, every line she had crossed. She was saving him, and in doing so, she was potentially ending everything she had. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. Frank burst into the office 2 minutes later, his face ashen. He took in the scene, the cleaner performing CPR on the boss, the toddler watching, the shattered monitor. For a second, he was frozen by the sheer surreal magnitude of it. Then his training kicked in. "EMS is in the building, elevators coming, I'll guide them in." He radioed down to the lobby. The next minutes were a blur of controlled chaos. Paramedics swarmed the room, a whirlwind of green uniforms and equipment. Chloe was pulled away, her role abruptly over. She stood against the wall, clutching Maya to her chest, suddenly shivering as the adrenaline receded. She watched as they cut open Thorn's $10,000 shirt, attached electrode pads, listened for vital signs she couldn't hear. One paramedic barked, "VFib, charging to 200. A sharp command of clear. And Thorn's body jerked on the floor. Maya buried her face in Chloe's neck. The man jumped mammo. They worked on him for what felt like an eternity, loading him onto a gurney, starting an IV, continuing compressions as they wheeled him swiftly out. One of the paramedics paused, looking at Chloe. "You did good. You started compressions. That gives him a chance." Then he was gone, following the gurney into the elevator. The sudden quiet was deafening. The office was a wreck of medical detritus, packaging, a torn shirt, a single disposable glove on the floor. Frank remained, looking at Chloe with an unreadable expression. The weight of the rulebook descended between them. "Chloe," he said slowly, "the child." "I know," she whispered, tears finally spilling over. "The daycare was closed. I had no choice. Frank, I'm so sorry. I'll go. I'll turn in my card, just please." Frank looked from her tear-streaked face to Maya, who was now peeking out, her eyes huge. He looked at the spot on the floor where the most powerful man in the building had nearly died, and where a cleaning woman had fought to keep him alive. He sighed, a long, weary sound that carried the weight of night shifts and Janitor resignation. "The report," he said, his voice low. "I have to file an incident report. It will ask who was present." He met her eyes. "The system logged one keycard entry tonight. Yours. It logged one 911 call from Mr. Thorne's phone. The paramedics saw you and the girl." He was outlining the inescapable facts, the evidence chain. "What do you want the report to say?" It was a question wrapped in an offer. He was giving her a sliver of narrative control. Did she admit she brought her child, guaranteeing her termination and possible legal trouble, or did they craft a story where maybe she heard a crash while cleaning an adjacent office, entered to investigate, found him alone, and called for help? Before she could answer, a new voice, sharp with authority, cut through the room. "What in God's name is going on here?" Standing in the doorway was Miranda Vance, Thorne's chief operating officer. She was in workout clothes, a jacket thrown over them. She must have been called by security or seen the commotion from her own late-night office across the street. Her eyes scanned the room, the medical trash, the grieving cleaner, the child, the shocked security guard, landing finally on Frank. "Frank, report, now, where is Aris?" Frank straightened. "He was taken by ambulance to City General, ma'am. Cardiac event. This is Chloe. She's with the cleaning service. She was the one on site. She initiated the 911 call and administered aid." Miranda's piercing gaze shifted to Chloe. It was not a look of gratitude. It was an audit, a risk assessment. "You were here after hours with a child." It was an accusation, not a question. This was it, the institutional wall. Chloe felt the last of her hope drain away. She hugged Maya tighter, ready for the blow. But then Maya, from the safety of her mother's arms, looked at the severe woman in the doorway and spoke into the tense silence. She held up Bubbles the dolphin. "We helped the sad man. He's gonna get a band-aid." Miranda Vance stared at the child, then at Chloe, and in her eyes, the human tragedy was already being processed into a corporate liability spreadsheet. The band-aid comment hung in the air, a speck of innocence in a room now thick with procedural dread. She didn't acknowledge it. Instead, she turned her laser focus back to Frank. "You have the security footage from this hallway from the last 2 hours. I want it quarantined. No copies. No one views it without my direct authorization." "Understood." Frank nodded, the soldier following orders. "Yes, ma'am." "Chloe," Miranda said, turning the name into an assessment, "you will come with me to my office. Now, Frank, please watch the child for a few minutes." It wasn't a request. It was a relocation of assets. Chloe's arms tightened around Maya instinctively. "She stays with me." Miranda's expression softened by a fraction, a calculated shift. "It's a conversation about your employment and the events of this evening. It's best she doesn't hear it. Frank is perfectly capable. She can stay right here with her dolphin." The words sounded foreign in her mouth. Maya, sensing her mother's tension, clung harder. Chloe looked at Frank, who gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was the look of someone who would not let harm come to a child. Reluctantly, Chloe pried Maya's arms loose and knelt down. "You stay with Mr. Frank. Mama has to talk to the lady for 5 minutes. You be good for Bubbles." Maya's lip trembled, but she took Frank's offered hand, her small fingers disappearing into his large, weathered palm. Chloe followed Miranda out of the wrecked office, down the hall to a smaller, sleek conference room. Miranda closed the door and did not sit down. "What is the cleaning services policy on bringing children to client sites?" she asked, launching the first missile. "It's prohibited," Chloe said, her voice flat. There was no point lying. "And yet you did." "My childcare fell through. I couldn't miss the shift. I intended to keep her hidden. I made a terrible judgment call." "Judgment call," Miranda repeated, as if tasting the phrase. "Your judgment call saved Aris Thorne's life, according to the paramedics, but your judgment call also created a massive exposure for this company, an unauthorized minor on premises after hours. If this becomes public, the narrative will not be about your heroism. It will be about why a billionaire was left alone to die while a cleaning service broke its contract. The lawsuits from shareholders, the insurance ramifications." She trailed off, pinching the bridge of her nose. Do you understand the position you've put us in? Chloe felt a hot spark of anger cut through her fear. The position of asterisk put asterisk you in. He was dying on the floor. My daughter called for help. And we are grateful, Miranda said, the gratitude sounding like a line from a press release. But gratitude and liability operate on different tracks. My job is to protect this company. Right now, you and that child are a liability vector. The coldness of it was breathtaking. Chloe had just pumped a man's heart with her own hands, and she was being discussed as a risk factor. What do you want from me? Miranda finally sat, gesturing for Chloe to do the same. Chloe remained standing. I want a controlled story. Frank's report will state that he was alerted to a disturbance on 34 during his rounds, discovered Mr. Thorne in distress, and found you already performing CPR. The origin of the 911 call will be attributed to the security desk. The child will not be mentioned. It was the cover-up, neatly packaged. It protected the company. It even protected Chloe from termination by her service, as she would be framed as a heroic bystander, not a rule breaker. But it erased Maya completely. It erased the truth of that tiny voice on the phone that first summoned help. Why, Chloe asked, though she knew the answer. Because the truth is messy. A child humanizes the story, yes, but in the wrong way. It becomes a sensational human interest piece. Billionaire saved by toddler. The media will swarm. They will dig into your life. They will dig into why you had her here. They will find the policy violation, and that will morph into negligent company allows child in unsafe environment. The focus shifts from life-saving to blame. This way, the story is clean. Dedicated employee and alert security saves CEO. It's corporate teamwork. It's the narrative we can manage. It was also ruthlessly logical. Chloe saw the tracks laid out before her. Accept the lie, keep her job, maybe even get a commendation. Refuse, and she would be fired for cause, possibly sued for trespass, and have her name dragged through mud anyway when the company defended itself by exposing her violation first. Frank is on board, she asked quietly. Frank understands chain of command. He also understands his pension, Miranda said, a subtle reminder of the levers of power. The paramedics saw the girl, but they have no context. To them, she was just a child in an office. We will say she is the daughter of another employee who was briefly on site. It's plausible deniability. The conference room felt airless. Chloe thought of Maya's proud face holding the phone. We helped the sad man. I need to think, she whispered. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. That's when I brief the board's interim committee. You will have my offer of settlement by then, a 1-year severance package from your cleaning service, paid by us, and a positive employment reference. In exchange, your signature on a non-disclosure agreement and your adherence to the agreed-upon story. Alternatively, you can decline, and we will be forced to engage our legal team to address the breach of contract and unauthorized access. The choice is yours. Miranda stood, the meeting clearly over. Go home, be with your daughter. Frank will escort you out. I'll have a car service take you. We'll talk in the morning. Chloe walked back to Thorne's office in a daze. Maya ran to her, burying her face in her legs. Frank wouldn't meet her eyes. The drive home in the Blacktown car was silent. Maya fell asleep against her chest. The apartment felt smaller, shabbier, more fragile than ever. She didn't sleep. She sat on the couch with the bad spring, watching the sky lighten from black to gray, playing the events on a loop. The fear in Maya's eyes in the dark closet, the terrible stillness of Thorne's body, the feel of his ribs under her palms, the calm voice of the dispatcher, and then Miranda Vance offering a gilded cage of a lie. At 7 a.m., her phone buzzed, a news alert. She thumbed it open and her blood froze. The headline was from a local business blog, known for its inside sources. Thorne Industries CEO in critical condition after office cardiac arrest. The article was thin on medical details but devastating in its one scoop. It quoted a source familiar with the incident, who said life-saving measures were initiated not by security, but by, quote, a member of the night cleaning staff who was on site with her young child. The leak had happened. Miranda's controlled narrative was already crumbling. Her phone rang instantly. It was Miranda, Her voice was taut, stripped of its polished calm. "You spoke to the press." "I didn't. I haven't spoken to anyone." "Then who did, Frank? The paramedics?" "I don't know. Maybe your source, familiar with the incident, is someone asterisk you talked to." There was a sharp silence on the line. "Regardless, the situation has changed. The offer is withdrawn. Do not come to the building. Do not speak to anyone. Our legal team will be in touch." The call disconnected. Chloe stared at the phone, the world tilting. The safety net of the lie had been yanked away. Now she was in freefall, with a media storm brewing beneath her. She was about to become the story she never wanted to be. By 9 a.m., the story had legs. Another outlet picked it up, adding the tantalizing, unconfirmed detail: "Child may have placed emergency call." The phrase "toddler hero" was used. It was going viral in the business and local news circles. The human interest angle Miranda feared was taking shape, but it was wild, unfettered, and utterly out of her control. At 10 a.m., a knock came at her door. It was a reporter and a photographer from a major city newspaper. "Ms. Chloe, we'd like to talk to you about last night. People are calling your daughter a hero." Chloe slammed the door and locked it, sliding down to the floor, hugging her knees. Maya, sensing her mother's panic, started to cry. This was the "wait, it gets worse" moment. The institutional containment had failed. The story was alive in the wild, and it was pulling them into its vortex. But the real twist, the revelation that reframed everything, was still in a sterile hospital room 10 miles away. At City General Hospital, Aris Thorne floated in a sedated haze. He had been stabilized after emergency surgery to place a stent in a fully blocked coronary artery. He had been resuscitated twice, once in the office, once in the ambulance. His prognosis was guarded. The medical report noted the critical factor in his survival: bystander CPR initiated within 2 minutes of collapse. His personal attorney, Marcus Webb, sat by the bed, tablet in hand. He had already been on the phone with Miranda, with the board, with the PR crisis firm. The leaked story was a disaster, but as he scrolled through the early news reports, a different thought occurred to him, a ruthless, strategic thought. When Thorne finally stirred, his eyes fluttering open to the blurred world of the ICU, his first sensation was not pain, but a profound, bewildering weakness. The second was the face of his attorney. "Aris, don't try to speak. You're in the hospital. You had a major heart attack. You're alive." Thorne's gaze was cloudy, but it sharpened with a familiar, stubborn intensity. He tried to form a word. It came out a rasp. "How?" Webb leaned closer. "You collapsed in your office. The night cleaner found you. She and security performed CPR. The paramedics got you back." It was the sanitized, pre-leak version. But Thorne's mind, though drugged, was a trap for inconsistencies. He remembered fragments: the crushing pain, the fall, the ceiling lights, and then a sound, a small, high voice, something about a boo-boo. It was a dream, a hallucination born of hypoxia. He let his eyes close. Webb, thinking he was asleep, stepped out into the hallway to take another call. A nurse adjusted Thorne's IV. As she did, she smiled warmly at him. "You're a very lucky man. My daughter saw the news this morning. She's all excited about the little girl who helped save you, says she wants to be a helper like her when she grows up." Thorne's eyes snapped open. He fixed the nurse with a stare. His voice was a dry croak, but clear. "What little girl?" The nurse hesitated, realizing she'd overstepped. It's probably just internet gossip. You should rest." "Tell me." The command was weak, but absolute. Flustered, the nurse relented. "The news, they're saying a cleaner was there with her little girl, that the little one might have been the one to actually call for help. It's a sweet story. Now really, you need to." "Get Marcus," Thorne interrupted. When Webb re-entered the room, Thorne was more alert, a dangerous light in his eyes. "The real story, now." Webb sighed, realizing the jig was up. He laid it out: the cleaner with the child, the likely 911 call, the company's attempt to control the narrative, the subsequent leak. Thorne listened, his face impassive. When Webb finished, he was silent for a full minute, staring at the acoustic tile ceiling. The machines beeped around him. Her name, he said finally. The cleaner, Chloe, I don't have a last name. The child is Maya. Chloe and Maya, Thorne repeated, as if testing the weight of the names. These were the people who existed in the blind spot of his world, the ghosts who polished his glass at night. And one of them, a child, had apparently done what his entire expensive, high-tech security system could not. Summoned a lifeline when he was utterly helpless. Miranda's plan, he stated, the cover story to erase them. It was the prudent course from a liability perspective, Webb said defensively. Prudent, Thorne echoed, the word tasting like ash. He thought of the stack of lawsuits on his desk, the shareholders circling, the cold, prudent calculations that had defined his life. They had just nearly buried him. And then, from the world he never saw, came something utterly imprudent. A child with a stuffed dolphin and a band-aid. The cleaner, he said, his voice gaining a shred of its old force. I want to see her, and the child, today. Webb blanched. Aris, that's not advisable. The media is all over this. Your health is. Today, Marcus, arrange it. And tell Miranda her services are no longer required. She's fired. It was the pivot. The moment the narrative control shattered not from a leak, but from the source itself. The billionaire, confronted with the unvarnished truth of his salvation, was choosing the messy human story over the clean corporate one. And with that choice, the ground was about to shift under everyone's feet. Chloe, hiding in her apartment from the knocking reporters, had no idea that the man at the center of the storm had just woken up and was about to change everything. The call came to Chloe's apartment not from a lawyer, but from a man with a kind, tired voice who identified himself as Mr. Thorne's personal assistant. He asked, very politely, if she and Maya would be willing to visit the hospital that afternoon. A car would be sent. There would be no media. It was entirely her choice. Chloe, standing amid the breakfast dishes she hadn't cleaned, felt the world tilt on a new, unfamiliar axis. The threat had been replaced by an invitation. She said yes. The car was discreet. The route into the hospital was through a private entrance. They were escorted to the cardiac intensive care unit not as curiosities, but as honored guests. When the door to the room opened, Chloe's breath caught. Aris Thorne looked smaller in the hospital bed, surrounded by wires and blinking machines, his face pale against the white sheets, but his eyes were awake and they were clear. He looked at Chloe first, a long, assessing look that held none of Miranda's cold calculation. Then his gaze dropped to Maya, who was hiding behind Chloe's legs, clutching bubbles. A strange, soft expression flickered across his face, something that hadn't been there in the wedding photo on his desk. It looked like recognition. Chloe, he said, his voice a rough whisper. And Maya, he knew her name. He said it carefully, as if pronouncing an important, unfamiliar word. Thank you for coming. Chloe didn't know what to say. How are you feeling, Mr. Thorne? Alive, he said simply, which I am told is because of you and because of her, he nodded toward Maya. The nurses are full of the story, the little girl who called 911. So he knew the cover story was dead. Chloe's heart hammered. I need to explain about her being there. He raised a hand, a weak gesture that still commanded silence. You don't. I understand desperation. I understand impossible choices. I've built an empire on recognizing leverage points, but I failed to recognize the one that mattered most last night. A mother's love for her child is the most powerful, unpredictable force on earth. You leveraged that to save my life. I am in your debt, not the company's, mine. The words hung in the sterile air. They were not corporate, they were personal. They changed everything. He shifted slightly, wincing. Miranda Vance no longer works for me. Her approach was wrong. The company will issue a statement today from me telling the truth, that I was saved by the quick thinking and courage of Chloe and her daughter, Maya, that I am deeply grateful, and that their privacy is to be respected. Chloe felt the ground solidify beneath her feet for the first time in 24 hours. The looming threat of legal action, of public shamming, dissolved. Thank you, she breathed. Don't thank me yet, he said, a ghost of his old sharpness returning. The truth has consequences. The media will want a piece of you for a while. My team will handle it. They will also handle your situation with the cleaning service. You are not being fired. You are being promoted. The head of building operations for the tower needs a new executive assistant. It comes with a salary, benefits, and perhaps most importantly, a schedule that aligns with daycare hours. The job is yours if you want it. Chloe was speechless. It was a lifeline thrown from an unimaginable height, a real job, security, a future that didn't depend on a broken vacuum cleaner or a sympathetic security guard. Maya, emboldened by the quiet, peeked out from behind Chloe. She stared at the man in the bed, at the tubes in his arm. "You got your band-aid?" she asked. Aris Thorne looked at the IV line taped to his hand. A slow, genuine smile, thin and cracked but real, touched his lips. "I did. A very big one. Thank you for your help, Maya." She beamed, the full force of her 3-year-old pride shining out. "You're welcome." He looked back at Chloe. "There is one more thing, for Maya, a trust, for her education, whatever she wants. It's not a payoff, it's an investment, in the kind of person who helps sad men on the floor." Chloe wanted to refuse, out of pride, out of a lifetime of never taking handouts. But she looked at Maya, at her bright, curious face, and she thought of the spring in the couch, the shoes that were too small, the constant calculation of minutes. She nodded, tears welling up. "Thank you." The meeting lasted only 15 minutes, but in that time, the entire architecture of power in the room had inverted. The billionaire was the supplicant, the cleaner was the benefactor, the child was the judge of it all. The statement from Thorne Industries went out at 3 p.m. It was direct, personal, and attributed directly to Aris Thorne. It confirmed the essential facts, praised Chloe and Maya by first name, and asked for privacy. It did something else too. It announced a full review of the company's contracts with third-party service providers, with a mandate to ensure fair wages, benefits, and family-supportive policies for all staff, from the executive suite to the night cleaning crews. The media storm, deprived of a scandal and handed a straightforward story of heroism and gratitude, spun for a day or two and then moved on. Chloe gave one brief, joint interview with a respected outlet, with Thorne's PR person present. She was calm, humble, and deflect all praise onto the paramedics and the 911 dispatcher. She said she was just a mom who was in the right place at the wrong time. The world ate it up. The real change was quieter and deeper. Chloe started her new job 2 weeks later. Her first task was not fetching coffee, but helping to design the new on-site childcare subsidy program for all building tenants. Frank got a raise and a formal commendation. The cleaning service, under new pressure from its biggest client, revised its policies to include emergency backup childcare referrals. And Aris Thorne, his recovery was slow. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital, then another month in a rehabilitation facility. The man who returned to the office was different. The cold, driven edge was still there, but it was tempered. He delegated more. He took weekends off. He visited the garden on the 30th floor terrace he'd never once stepped into before. He did not become a saint. He was still a demanding, brilliant, difficult CEO, but the silence in his life began to fill. He had lunch with his sister. He reconnected with his old friend from the board. And every Tuesday afternoon, when Chloe worked late to prepare for the Wednesday operations meeting, he would often wander down to her office, not to check on work, to ask about Maya. He kept a drawing she made for him in rehab, a green crayon scribble that she said was him, with a big red heart. He had it framed, not in his office, but in the private sitting room next to it. A small, silent rebellion against his own former priorities. One evening, 6 months after the heart attack, Chloe was working late again. Maya was with her, drawing at a small table in the corner of the office. Thorne walked in, looking tired but calm. He nodded to Chloe, then went over to Maya's table. He knelt down, with some difficulty, to be at her eye level. "Hello, Maya." "Hi, Ash," she said, using the nickname she'd decided on one day and he had never corrected. "What are you drawing?" "A big boat, for you and me and Mama and Bubbles. We're gonna go see whales." "Sounds like an excellent plan," he said seriously. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped box. "I brought you something to say thank you again." Maya opened it. Inside was not a toy, but a small, sturdy child's smartwatch. "It has one button," he explained. "The green button. If you ever need help, you push it, and it calls the people who can come, just like you did for me." Maya's eyes went wide with the solemn responsibility of it. She put it on her wrist immediately. "Now I can help everybody," she announced. Chloe watched from her desk, her throat tight. This was the surprising detail, the final loop closed. The man who had been saved by a child unlocking a phone was now giving that child a dedicated tool to save others. It was a tribute and a passing of the torch. Aris Thorne stood up, his hand resting lightly on Maya's curly head for a moment. He looked at Chloe, and for a second, the mask of the CEO fell away completely. In its place was simply a man who understood, too late and just in time, that his legacy would not be the towers he built, but the lives he touched after he almost lost his own. He didn't say anything else. He just nodded and walked out, leaving mother and daughter in the warm pool of lamplight. The story doesn't end with a fairy tale merger of lives. They didn't become family in the traditional sense. Chloe still called him Mr. Thorne at work. He still lived in his penthouse, and she in her apartment, though now one in a better building, without the smell of fried fish. But a connection had been forged in the cold terror of that office floor, a bond of mutual debt and unexpected grace. In the end, a 3-year-old girl with a stuffed dolphin did what no boardroom opponent, no market crash, no medical warning could do. She stopped a powerful man in his tracks, not with force, but with a simple, undeniable truth, that everyone, even a billionaire on the 34th floor, is just a person. And sometimes, a person needs to be seen, to be reached for, and to be reminded that help can come from the most invisible places, in the smallest, most determined packages. That is the real power in this story, not the inversion of status, but the erasure of it. In that moment on the floor, there was no CEO and no cleaner's daughter. There was just a human being in trouble and another human being who had not yet learned to look away. So what do we take from a story like this? It's easy to see it as a singular, miraculous accident, a perfect storm of misfortune and innocence that saved a life. But look closer. The miracle wasn't the child's presence, it was her perception. She hadn't yet been taught to see a billionaire on the floor as anything other than a person who needed help. She hadn't learned to categorize, to defer, to assume someone else would act. Her world was still small enough that every person in it was her responsibility. We build these towers, literally and figuratively. We create systems of status, of inaccessibility, of professional distance. We make rules about who is allowed to be where and who is meant to be seen. And in doing so, we often wall ourselves off from the very human connections that might save us, not just in a medical crisis, but from the slower, quieter collapses of the spirit. Aris Thorne had everything, and he was dying of loneliness in a room full of his own achievements. Chloe and Maya had almost nothing, and they were rich in the only currency that mattered in that moment, the capacity to see and to act. This isn't a story about a toddler hero. It's a story about the walls we build and the small, persistent forces that can topple them. It's about the people who move through the background of our lives, the cleaners, the security guards, the delivery drivers, the people we train ourselves to look past. They are not just supporting characters in our story. They have their own full, complex, resilient lives, and sometimes their journey intersects with ours at the precise moment we are most vulnerable. What if we saw them before the crisis? What if we valued their humanity not as an abstraction, but as a vital part of our own ecosystem? The lingering question this story leaves us with isn't about fate. It's about attention. Who are you overlooking in your own life? Who moves through your world, silently keeping it running, that you have never truly seen? And what invisible threads of connection and care might already exist, waiting for the moment when the lights go out, and the only thing left is our shared, fragile humanity. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of a moment when someone's kindness surprised you from an unexpected direction, then you understand why we tell these tales. This channel is built on the belief that the most powerful narratives aren't the loudest ones. They are the quiet ones, the moments of courage that never make the headline, the small acts of decency that change a life's trajectory, the invisible bonds that hold us together when everything else falls apart. We don't shout here, we don't chase trends. We sit with the stories that are worth staying for, stories that remind us of who we are and who we could be to each other. If you want to stay with us, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, become part of a community that values depth over distraction and humanity over hype. Share your own story in the comments, a time when you were seen or when you saw someone in a way that changed everything. Because there are more stories like this one, stories of quiet bravery, unexpected grace, and the invisible hands that hold us up when we fall, and we'll be here waiting to tell them to you. Thanks for watching.